As a native Texan, I've often heard the phrase, it's not the heat that will get you, it's the humidity. So how can you stay safe when it feels like you're walking through soup? I'm Andrea, the Community Engagement Specialist from Williamson County and City's Health District, a county just north of Austin, Texas, who's a passionate public health worker with almost a decade of public health experience, dedicated to making public health more accessible to you, the public, on Public Health Is. If you've ever been curious about the ins and outs of public health, join me for a special series I'm calling In the News to learn more about emerging public health issues, how they could and would impact the Lone Star State, and what that means for you as a resident of Williamson County. So today, I've got a special guest if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Thanks for having me. My name is Melanie Jones, and I'm an Emergency Preparedness and Response Specialist with WCCHD. I've been with WCCHD for about 2 years now, and before coming here, I was a paramedic for 15 years. And my role at WCCHD has allowed me to combine my healthcare experience and my passion for emergency response in a more proactive and preventative manner.
Wonderful. I think you are definitely a subject matter expert for this topic. So Texas heat is interesting. I mean, I think most of the southern U.S. in general, it's not just about how hot it gets, but the humidity that really makes being outside that much more unbearable.
Definitely. Not only are Texas summers hot, high humidity levels can make it feel even hotter. Sweat evaporation is one of our body's natural ways to cool off. And when the moisture is high in the air, that system just doesn't work as effectively.
Right? It's like walking through a sauna, you're just keeping moist. So then what are the risks when you are out in the heat for a prolonged period of time, especially when it is so humid?
So heat-related illness occurs when our body's natural cooling methods can't keep up with the increase in temperature, and that causes our body's temperature to rise, and that can make us really sick. This can range anywhere from mild heat cramps to life-threatening emergencies such as heat stroke.
Right. Heat is dangerous. And who is most at risk for this? Is this something where it's just like anybody and everybody?
Everyone can suffer from heat illness. Even if you are an athlete and you're well conditioned, you can still become victim to heat illness. There are some higher risk groups, and those are older adults, obviously infants and young children. And then people with certain medical conditions should be a little bit more mindful of heat conditions.
So then are there mentioned heat stroke, but are there differences within heat-related illnesses? And if so, what are the signs and symptoms that someone should look out for?
There definitely is. It's a spectrum. We hear a lot about dehydration, and while dehydration isn't specifically a heat-related illness, it can be caused by a variety of conditions. It can make you feel pretty bad, and it affects your body's ability to function properly and really can put you at a much greater risk for the other heat illnesses. Dehydration occurs when your body's fluid output is more than the intake. Things like if you're not drinking enough water and you're sweating a lot, you're losing more fluid than you're taking in. That can cause you to kind of have a deficit. Some common symptoms of dehydration are dry mouth or excessive thirst, decrease in urination, or you may notice that your urine looks a little bit darker than normal. You may feel more tired than usual or get kind of sleepy. Headaches are common. You may even feel a little bit lightheaded, especially when you stand up from a sitting or laying position.
Okay. All of that is good to know. So I am a native Texan, but I'm from South Texas down on the border. And my husband is from Southeast Texas, so right on the border with Louisiana. And we joke, when he came to visit me, the humidity was relatively low. He says, I live in a desert. That's not true. And he is from the swamp. He was having nosebleeds, I think cracked lips, which has never happened to me in my life. But when I was visiting him, it must have been 80 some degrees. I could not be outside. I was like, this is horrific. And he says, well, drink water. I don't drink water. I'm a cactus. I live off caffeine, and that is my hydration. So definitely dehydration, something important to look out for, but it is a spectrum. And like you mentioned, is dependent on each person and what they're used to and whether or not they're acclimated to the conditions outside.
Definitely. And dehydration, even you are not feeling bad, it can set you up for other illnesses such as heat cramps, heat exhaustion, or heat stroke. So sometimes you hear somebody talk about a Charlie horse after
Mhm.
they ran out in the heat, or sometimes people will talk about what feels like a stitch in the side. Those are things to pay attention to. They're caused when your body loses both too much fluid and salt. And that's your body's way of saying, hey, I'm getting overheated, and you're likely to be moving into heat exhaustion. Heat exhaustion, obviously, it's a more serious condition, and it occurs when you lose way too much water, way too much salt, and your symptoms start getting a little bit more severe. Skin is a hard indicator for where you're at in that
Mhm.
spectrum because depending on who you are, some people turn bright red right away when they get hot. Other people, if they're bright red, they're really overheated. Some people get pale. Their skin may feel cool to the touch because their body is trying to keep that heat away from their core. So, skin temperature, you can be sweating, you can be hot and dry. It's hard to use that as a gauge unless really you know yourself, you know the person you're with. It should be used as a benchmark from looking at where you started to where you are.
Right. When it comes to whether you're sweating or you're beet red, that isn't necessarily the indicator that we would wanna focus on when it comes to heat exhaustion and heat-related illnesses because like you mentioned, my husband is light-skinned, he's out in the sun for 5 minutes, he's gonna be beet red. That's just how it is, and that doesn't necessarily mean that he's dehydrated or that anything's wrong, his skin is just sensitive to the sun. Versus myself, as a person of color, I could be out for hours and my color for the most part will not change, but I will definitely feel not great if I have not been properly hydrating and I've just been out and about in the sun for too long.
Exactly. Skin temperature, color, whether you're sweating and how heavily, that's all really person dependent. So that's not really a good guide for whether somebody's in heat exhaustion. The things you really want to start being concerned about is nausea or vomiting, a severe headache, dizziness that doesn't pass pretty quickly, or actually fainting or passing out. Those are all signs that your condition is becoming a little bit more serious, and it's time to actively move out of the heat and start cooling down and hydrating again. The biggest concern when we're talking about extreme heat is heat stroke. Heat stroke's really a life threatening medical emergency and that requires immediate attention. It happens when the body's temperature gets too high. Often the criteria is greater than 104 degrees. Those you won't know if you're in heat stroke.
Mhm.
Someone else, hopefully, or somebody around you will notice because it comes with signs like confusion. Somebody may start slurring their words. They may be unconscious. People can even have seizures when they're having heat stroke. And again, this is a life threatening emergency and you need to act immediately. You need to call 911 and get help there, get professional help there. Then, while you're waiting for an ambulance or first responders to get there, try to move that person to a cooler place and get them cooled down as quickly as you can. You can pour cool water over them. If you have wet towels, place ice packs around their neck, in their groin area, any fans to kind of help. Remember, we talked about that evaporation.
Mhm.
Fans can help kind of move the air across somebody that'll help bring their body temperature down. I know that people are sometimes concerned about they've heard that it's dangerous to cool people off too
Mhm.
quickly because people will start shivering. So, when we're talking about body temperatures of 104 degrees, that's not our concern. Our concern is getting that body temperature down.
Mhm.
So, don't let that concern prevent you from actively trying to cool somebody off. And then don't give them fluids unless directed by a medical professional.
Okay, that's good to know. So just making sure that they are cooling down as best they can while you wait for medical help.
Right. Get emergency help on the way, help start actively cooling them down, and keep them safe until help arrives.
Okay. So, what are some ways that we can stay safe in the heat? Because I feel like Texas in the summer, it's inevitable. You're going to be outside. It's going to be hot. It's going to be humid.
Right. And nobody's immune to the heat in Texas. So, the most important thing you can do is to drink water regularly before, during, and after outdoor activity. Take breaks if you're going to be outside, take breaks frequently. If you can get into air conditioning periodically or shade. I know sometimes people don't like to go inside and get in the air conditioning and cool down if they're just going to go back out and get sweaty, but it's important to give your body that temperature break and bring your body temperature back down to normal. Avoid a lot of strenuous outdoor activity during the hottest parts of the day. We all know that in Texas, 4 o'clock in the afternoon is brutal. So
Mhm.
if you've got things you need to do outside, get up early, get out there before everything gets too hot. Wear lightweight, loose fitting clothing that's light in color, as it won't absorb as much heat. Sunscreen, that's not going to prevent you from getting heat exhaustion, but that is an important safety in the sun recommendation. And wear a wide brim hat and keep your head covered. That'll help keep some of the sun off your face. And make sure you're checking on older adults, your neighbors, kids, and we've all heard it. Don't leave your children and your pets in a parked vehicle. And that goes for grandma, any elderly adults, anyone who can't get themselves out of the vehicle if they get too hot.
Mhm.
And for parents, if you've taken your kids for a walk, taken the baby for a walk in the stroller, I know that with Texas mosquitoes, you want to keep those mosquitoes off the baby, but putting a blanket or something over the top of the stroller can really increase the heat underneath and bring the temperature of the stroller up. So try to keep some air flowing through that stroller. And if you see somebody or are concerned that somebody is suffering from heat related illness, call 911.
And I think that comment about infants and strollers is so important. It's not something you think about until you are a parent. And especially my son has sensitive skin as well. So we're constantly having to have him in long sleeves or just out of the sun as much as possible. I like that because that's something that I hear all the time of, oh, well, you need to cover the stroller to protect from the sun, but you don't want them to overheat because that would trap the heat in there. So, from what I've seen and read, what's recommended is if you've got like a light linen or receiving blanket, you dampen that and then keep a fan underneath that. And that is a great way to keep your baby cool. But of course, if you can avoid being outside, that's always the best option.
Definitely. Just like when they tell you to walk your pets in the early morning hours or the evening, same goes for the baby. Babies don't regulate their temperature like adults
Mhm.
do, and they don't have a way to tell you when they're getting overheated. So you've got to take on that role of making sure that they're staying at the right temperature.
Absolutely. So I want to go through some common misconceptions that I've heard myself growing up, which is if someone's sweating, they're not having a heat stroke. Like as long as you're sweating, that's a sign that you're okay. You just need to drink water and take a break. How true is that?
So, like we talked about, sweating is one of your body's ways of cooling itself down. But just because there is still water in the tank doesn't mean that you don't need more. If you wait until you're no longer sweating, you're already into heat exhaustion and on your way to heat stroke, probably. So, that is definitely not a good indicator on where you're at in your hydration.
Okay. And so then sticking with the topic of hydration, my body will tell me if I need water once I become thirsty.
I hear that a lot. Unfortunately, thirst is a warning sign. It's a red flag that your body throws up when you don't have enough water. So it's a much better idea to sip water regularly and don't let yourself get to the point that you are thirsty because that is often a late sign that you need water. And more importantly, it takes your body time to absorb that water. So if you wait till you're thirsty and you drink a gallon of water, that water you just drank, that's going to hydrate you for tomorrow. It takes your body 12 to 24 hours to absorb the water you're taking in. That's why it's important to be hydrated when you go out into the heat, to drink water while you're out there, and then continue to hydrate once you come inside.
And so I think That's a good point to mention because that ties into two different misconceptions. A lot of these, for some reason, have to do with water, that as long as you don't feel thirsty or you're drinking water, you'll be okay. That a quick drink of water will fix any illness you're suffering from. But from what you're saying, if you've reached that point, it's going to take you a while to recover. A couple sips of water aren't going to make much of a difference.
Absolutely. I'm pretty sure that most of these misconceptions were born out of people not wanting to drink water. Because, like you said,
Me-
I'd rather drink a cup of coffee than a glass of water. So, but unfortunately, your body needs water for a lot of functions. Large percentage of our body is made of water, and it just doesn't work right without it.
Hmm. Another one I've seen is, going back to the absorption of water, that if you just add salt to your water, then you'll be fine. You won't be dehydrated and you won't suffer any heat illnesses. But clearly, that's not the case either.
Sure, salt can help your body retain some water, but if you don't put the water in to begin with, then there isn't water for it to retain. Also, you have to be careful with salt. While we all need a little bit of salt in our diet, some people who have certain illnesses may have salt restrictions, or it can cause people to hold on to too much fluid. And that
Hmm.
can be a problem for some people who have some chronic illnesses. So, your best bet is to stay hydrated and drink water. If you feel like you're experiencing some of these things, some mild heat cramps, turn in a little electrolyte packet into one of your post outdoor activity waters is a great idea to kind of replace some of that salt
Hmm.
you might have lost. But certainly just adding salt tablets to an 8-ounce glass of water is not going to fix your problem.
Okay. And so then ultimately, someone saying that heat exhaustion is not that serious, that's a very mistaken take.
Absolutely. Your body has a great way of sending up warning signals. And while you may not be at the point of needing to go to the hospital, heat illness can progress really rapidly. So, what may be you started with a little bit of dehydration, you weren't as hydrated as you should have been when you started, then you got outside, you started having some cramps, you kind of pushed through those, stretched them out, they went away. And then you start having a little bit of a headache. The symptoms start to progress a little bit. And if you ignore those early warning signs, you can pretty quickly move into a heat stroke.
And by that point, you're not going to notice what's wrong. You'll
Right.
be so out of it that, uh,
Right, right. Heat stroke is something that the people around you will notice. You probably won't notice it yourself because usually people are having heat stroke. They are confused. Sometimes they can start slurring their words. They may lose consciousness. They can even have seizures.
And so, us as public health workers, like, why do we care about heat safety? Why are we talking about it?
That's a great question. So it's important to talk about it because it affects everyone. It literally affects the entire population. There is no one who is immune to heat stress. Also, it's important to know that extreme heat is the leading cause of weather related deaths. Public health agencies playing a really important role in providing education to the public, advising our community partners, identifying high risk populations and who we should be targeting to make sure that they're taken care of and that they know what precautions to take, and then coordinating with other response partners.
Yeah, definitely. Because when there's heat waves, especially when they are for an extended period of time, as I'm sure you've experienced yourself, sometimes that causes power outages.
Right.
And so
So
you need to be prepared.
definitely, I went down to Houston during Hurricane Beryl, and what they didn't anticipate was the extensive power outage and the duration of the power outage. So it was in the summertime and it was really hot and people were okay for a little bit. But then as the power outage continued on, put additional strain on the 911 system
Hmm.
because people were starting to call 911 because they were getting sick and not feeling well. And that overcrowded the ERs, and it really put a strain on the healthcare system.
Right. Because at the end of the day, for the most part, this is preventable.
It is, yes, it is almost 100% preventable.
So, what are the take home message you want our listeners to know when it comes to heat safety and heat related illnesses? We've spoken, of course, that it is mostly preventable and can become dangerous quickly. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
I think we covered most of them. Like you said, it's preventable and it's something to take really seriously and be mindful of. You don't need to be afraid of going outside, be
Hmm.
afraid of the heat. Just be smart about it. And like we talked about, the water you drink today is going to hydrate you tomorrow. So drink that water, whether you would rather have a cup of coffee or not. And some of the most important actions you can do are really simple: hydrate early, rest often, cool down, and keep an eye on the people around you.
Thank you so much, Melanie. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
A big thank you to our community response partners, and a big thank you to you if you've made it to the end of this episode. If you enjoyed what you heard, please follow this podcast, comment, and share this episode with family and friends. Want to learn more about emerging public health issues and all the great work Williamson County and City's Health District does to manage them? Tune in on the 2nd and 4th, and sometimes 5th, Tuesday of every month for new minisodes, where we'll discuss WCCHD's roles in keeping our communities healthy and safe. Be sure to check out our website at wcchd.org and follow us on all our social media pages for more information and podcast updates. Are you interested in learning more about a specific public health topic for a future episode? Feel free to reach out to us at publichealthistx@wilcotx.gov. And remember, public health is you, it's me, it's we, it's us, it's heat safety.